And we're back at home, but not in the studio, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Halloween Eve, All Hallows Eve, but this is actually the evening before Halloween, here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, it is some really bad weather, as we always seem to get bad weather in the fall in New York. And we kind of get bad weather in the spring and winter, too. I guess we got summer, and everything else is, in the immortal words of my mom, S-H-I-T. You'll have to forgive my cat. He's a real camera hog. But I was thinking about Halloween and how, as a kid, and then even as a young adult, I never really gave much thought to the idea of, at some point in my life, maybe I would be in a position where there would be trick-or-treaters ringing the bell and knocking on my door. It's not really that out there of a concept, but it never really dawned on me because until my late 40s, there was always theoretically somebody else who could have gotten the door. And now it's just me. Well, there's also Sheldon, but he can't really answer the door. He's just a cat. But the concept of Halloween, I've been trying to kind of rack my brain and use my allegedly really good memory to think of earliest Halloween memories. And I don't go back as far as I should, because there is a picture of me wearing what I think is a Yogi Bear costume. And people under 40 might not know who that is. Yogi Bear, not Yogi Berra, but Yogi Bear was kind of a big deal when I was growing up. There were cartoons and there were, TV specials like Charlie Brown type specials. Jellystone National Park. It's a lot of stuff that's funny now when you look back and you see that whoever wrote it was kind of winking at the adults. But I thought it was, this is great stuff. This is amazing. So it is true. There are a lot of cliches that are cliches because they are true. In general, kids of my generation, Generation X, I'm mid-range Gen Xer, almost literally right smack dab in the middle of Generation X. There were less controls of our movements in general. That doesn't mean there were none. But let's say circa 1980, Halloween 1980, I don't remember what I was. My mom used to get into putting makeup on me and stuff like that for costumes. But there really aren't any pictures of me in costume in Halloween 1980 or 81. There's the Yogi Bear picture. And then you have to fast forward until I'm in my 30s when, we had we had cameras on our phones that could take pictures. But I really I didn't get particularly daring with costumes until I got married. And then it's a different kind of, I don't want to say social strata, but it's a different kind of situation because you might get dressed up and make more of a fool out of yourself as an adult than you would as a kid. And on that count, I know that I succeeded. But let's say Halloween 1980, which was the Halloween when I was in first grade. I went out with a group of kids. There were a couple of kids who were probably like 13 or 14, but there were adults in the area. I grew up in Massapequa. It was a house. If you looked at my particular area of Massapequa, and just for reference, I was 2 blocks down from the All-American Hamburger Stand. If you know Massapequa, where Merrick Road meets Route 107, aka Hicksville Road, I lived about another between a quarter and a half a mile down. So it was a very heavily populated area. And there were plenty of adults all the way back then, 45 years ago, walking small children around. But my memory of that Halloween is that we were just going door to door, ringing bells, knocking on doors, and people were filling our big, it almost looked like the kind of thing you would put on your head to pretend to be a ghost. Like it was that sort of a bag that we had. And there was not really a sense of anything other than we were entitled to this candy. I never stopped to think about how idiotic, quite frankly, this part of the holiday is. Just knocking on doors of complete strangers, and they're going to put candy in your bag. And, back then there were already people talking about razor blades and apples, and don't take candy that isn't already wrapped. Don't accept cookies from people because they might want to poison you. Now, I'm not disagreeing with that, but we are knocking on doors of mostly complete strangers. There's a leap of faith just doing that, right? Now, to me, I'm knocking on the door and they better have candy for me. Now, I don't remember being sore. And I also never lived and it's one of the great moments in the last 25 years of movies, in the film American Splendor, the movie about the kind of underground cartoonist who was pretty successful in his way, named Harvey Pekar. He ended up being one of David Letterman's least favorite/least favorite guests, because Dave used to really give Harvey the business and make fun of him, but then Harvey gave it right back to Dave. This was when Dave was at NBC. And there was a time where Letterman's like, I don't want this fucking guy on my show anymore. He just insults me. Well, you kind of did it first, Dave. No offense. But that movie opens with Harvey Pekar on Halloween in Cleveland sometime in, the 1950 era. And he's out with someone's mother and a bunch of other children. And the kids are all dressed up like superheroes. You have, as the woman opens the door, we have Batman, and we have Superman and Green Lantern. And then she turns to Harvey Pekar, who's not wearing a costume. In the immortal words of Jim Carrey's Mark Kendall in Once Bitten, great vampire costume, Mark. I'm not wearing a costume. Well, he's not wearing a costume. He's just turning into a vampire, and, with 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So American Splendor, this woman is getting ready to give candy to the children who have knocked on her door, all the superheroes. And now we have Harvey Pekar, this little kid, and he's just dressed like he's going to school. He looks like a regular kid. And the woman goes, "What are you supposed to be, young man?" And he goes, I'm just Harvey Pekar. I'm just a kid from the neighborhood. And the woman is apparently not going to give him candy because he has not passed the minimum standards of at least making an attempt to a costume. So what he does, instead of asking the woman for candy, he throws his bag down, he turns around, and he goes, "Forget this." And then a line that resonated when we saw the movie, and now 23 years later, a line that even takes on a greater importance. Why do people have to be so stupid? Man, why do people have to be so stupid? I don't know. But the whole idea of trick-or-treating, you could argue, it's a little absurd. I think it's a little bit absurd. But I didn't think about how absurd it was until I became an adult and I was well past the trick-or-treating age. But I did appreciate the sense of community. And as a very young person who had difficulty interacting properly with others, I liked the structure of it. I liked the fact that there was safety in numbers. That's not make-believe. That was a real thing. And as a kid who was always afraid, who was always nervous, I had a lot of stuff going on. And I think about it, there doesn't seem to have been any reason for it to have taken place. I think that I just had the kind of overactive imagination that I always assumed if my mother was like 30 seconds late picking me up, well, she's gone. I'm going to be, my dad's going to have to quit his job and take care of it. Like I was going down so many rabbit holes. It's ironic because usually when people get older, they become more paranoid and their brain goes like this. Somehow I was lucky enough where the opposite happened. There is stuff that I used to worry about that I can't believe. What the hell was I? What? I've been able to quiet my brain down. And I don't know exactly how that happened. I don't know that I necessarily did anything. But it's better to be that way than constantly on edge, worried that family members are going to die a terrible death. And if they're 30 seconds late, that's why they're late. Going all the way to step 74 as opposed to maybe she hit a red light. What are you doing? So I would say if I were asked what was, I don't even remember having a Halloween with an incredible haul of candy. I feel like one of the years in the early 80s, I got a significant amount because that part of Massapequa, not every part of Pequa is the same in terms of what is the sort of hit percentage. How many houses can you successfully bother, knock on, ring bells, and get candy? Where I was, there were a lot of houses. Most of the properties, if they weren't all this, like the lot sizes, if they weren't all the same, they were similar. So you could hit a ton of houses in an hour. And then, you get a little bit older. When I moved in with my father, he had an apartment in Woodbury in what's now called Eagle Rock, right by used to be a movie theater, which is now the Equinox Gym, basically right where Jericho Turnpike, the Route 135, right over there. We used to get some trick-or-treaters, but that sort of situation, and now you're fast forwarding into the 1990s. There were only a couple. Most parents who lived in that place, they would take their kids somewhere else, because by that point they were starting to do things at the school for the kids and stuff like that. I don't remember getting that many trick-or-treaters in the number of years that, was living over there. But that's not a good setup for a kid, whether it's 1980 or 90 or 95 or today, where you're in an apartment complex. It doesn't lend itself to, it's not a good situation for a kid who spends months, as I used to think about how great Halloween was going to be. It was, whatever. That's the thing when you're a kid. You look forward to something, and then when it actually happens, it's usually not, it's not all you hope for. The joke about, what did you think of Charles Dickens' Great Expectations? It wasn't all I hoped for. Halloween usually wasn't all that I'd hoped for. But as an adult, when I started to become more social and actually going to Halloween parties that were not just for kids, that, there's probably going to be a lot of junk food and there might be some candy, but there is also going to be a lot of alcoholic beverages. And you have to fast forward all the way to 2008. 2008. I was already 34 and I was going to be 35. In 2008, I got invited. I was living, the house in Huntington, my dad's house where I lived at the time. I got invited to a house party elsewhere in Huntington. That was a good thing, that it was only about 5 minutes from where I lived, as if it mattered if it was 15. I wasn't going to go out and drink or use drugs or do anything like that. At least I didn't think that I was. No, I really didn't. So I got invited to a house party, and we were told, judgment-free kind of stuff. Just wear some kind of a costume. One of my friends used to go to these things wearing a T-shirt that said, "This is my Halloween costume." Now that would pass muster. I mean, at least that's a little bit clever. It's kind of funny. So on my own, no parental figure. I'm not going to ask my father, "What do you think I should wear?" I mean, there's levels of kind of embarrassing, and then there's levels of embarrassing. So some of you know where I'm going with this story. I wanted to do something at least reasonably creative for Halloween 2008. And I was going to know at least 20 people who were going to be at this party. This was when I was in my very gradually coming out of my cocoon era. I spent most of my 20s and into my 30s not really having a social life, thinking that I wanted a social life, but not really having one. All of the kind of early friendships from my younger days in Massapequa, I still communicated with some of those people, but I couldn't have called any of them like best friends or people we would hang out on Halloween, even in our 30s. It wasn't like that. And obviously, by age 34, many of my contemporaries who I had grown up with, and a lot of the people I knew from Bev's gym, they're married, they have kids, and I'm living with my father. Yeah, I'm working. I'm living with my father. I don't really have much in the way of a social life. But I want to go to this Halloween party because, and when I say maybe I'll get lucky, I'm not talking about, I'm going to meet some girl and 5 minutes later we're going to go into a broom closet. That maybe happened in movies. But when I say meet somebody, maybe I'll meet a friend. Maybe I'll meet a girl and we will connect. And I don't mean sex. Something. My goal for going was not just to, have some laughs and see some crazy costumes, which I for sure ended up doing. I got to do something. I have to try to do better to interact with people. I wasn't going to drink though. That I knew. I said, no, I'm not going to go there to drink. I'm not opposed to alcohol. I usually don't take part. So I started thinking, what could I do as far as a costume? Something that requires basically no prep time. I'm not going to have a wig. I'm not going to wear a superhero costume or anything like that. What could I do? Now, something that I always, when I was younger and I was a kid who was out of shape, to say out of shape is not really correct. I was never in shape. To say that I was out of shape would imply that I actually had some level of condition or fitness when I was a kid, which I really didn't. But there were certain things that I saw in movies where I was, quite frankly, jealous. When I would see people who looked really fit, I wanted to be that. I want to be able to do this. So there is a movie, it's not really that good. It's kind of a goofy movie from the 80s called Hunk. And it's basically, it's not really like a face-off, but it has elements of that. So you have this kind of much put upon dorky guy named Bradley. And played by an actor named Steve Levitt, who he also, I always say this thing, he looked like he was going to be a bigger star than he was. He was in a couple of TV movies and stuff, but he had a very appealing, he looked like a regular person is how I would describe it. And maybe in a different era, he would have become a bigger star because there were a lot of people who said, this guy is terrific. So he plays this nerdy guy named Bradley who makes a deal with the devil. Sound familiar? The devil's advocate. I'm thinking about Al Pacino screaming, he's an absentee landlord, but it's that kind of thing, only it's the late James Coco who plays the devil. So he makes a deal with the devil that he wants to be more attractive to women, quite frankly. Now, what guy who has struggled with social anxiety and with the simple notion of making eye contact, for example, with a young lady, who wouldn't want to be more desirable? Right? Who wouldn't want to have it easier where you just basically show up and the object of your desire just all but falls at your feet, metaphorically speaking. So he does this thing with the devil and James Coco, which was his last role, and he is transformed. Speaking of Al Pacino, he has transformed. He is no longer Bradley Brinkman. He is now Hunk. And Hunk is played by an actor who later was pretty good on the TV show 24. I think it was him. But basically, a Ken doll looking guy. A guy with perfect tan, perfect hair, perfect body, nice guy, and he's a 10. He's just basically, this is the guy that if he weren't so nice, you would want to take him to a dark alley and beat the shit out of him because you feel like this guy has had everything laid out for him. I found that that's not really true. As I've gotten older, there were people who I thought had the world by the short hairs, as they say, and they really didn't. And then people who I thought were much put upon actually were just quiet about their lives and they were doing better than I thought. This is why it's always important to go beyond surface. But in my case, what I just told you about myself was true. I had basically no social life. My social life consisted of going to Outback Steakhouse almost every night and interacting with the people there. That is a true statement, and I'm not ashamed of it. It's just what I was going through. I was trying to improve myself. I was trying to get better at interacting with other people, at actually looking at somebody while talking to them instead of staring off into space or looking at the ground. So I had an idea. What if I go as this character called Hunk in this movie? He attends a party, and this was something that made an impression on me. I always imagined being able to do this. I didn't think that I was going to be able to. But I wanted to at least where I could someday dress like this to go to I wasn't even thinking Halloween party. I want to be able to dress like this, period, right? So there's a scene in the movie Hunk where the character of Hunk, and the other thing he has a metabolism where he has to, like if he eats 10,000 calories, he's still shredded. You know what I mean? Like it's the fantasy of so many people, forget women, fantasy of everybody, that you don't ever have to watch your diet. This guy is eating wings and drinking beer and sitting there eating bag after bag of Doritos, and he's 4% body fat. Like if he's a real person, they fuck that guy. Fucking asshole. So he goes to a party wearing a suit top. It's actually more of a like a leisure suit, like almost a denim jacket that could pass for a suit if you didn't have a suit. So he's wearing a jacket and suit pants and a tie and no shirt. And it's really the only part of the movie that made an impression on me. The rest of it it's kind of pat would be the word I would use. It's not really that creative. It's very on the nose. He learns that just because he looks a certain way doesn't mean he's not still miserable. I mean, it's a little John Frankenheimer seconds with Rock Hudson and John Randolph playing the same character, just giving him a different name. I think it's funny. I never thought of it, that those two movies have more in common than I thought. That movie is a masterpiece. Hunk is just very, as I say, on the nose and a little bit silly, more than a little bit silly, but it has a decent message. But I imagined maybe I could be that guy. I'll go to this Halloween party as the character of Hunk, even though no one at this party is going to have any idea that this is from a movie. So you talk about a zero prep Halloween costume. My dad was away. You think about this, a 33-year-old guy with this whole house to himself. I mean, I could be throwing keggers. I could be doing all kinds of Tom Cruise risky business kind of stuff. And I'm not hosting a party. I'm not home. I'm going to someone's house. So I go to my closet and I see that one of my suits, when would I ever have worn a suit back then? Very rarely. It would have to be me going to some kind of a social event, not like that, but a wedding, a bar mitzvah, confirmation, sweet 16, whatever the case might be. So one of my suits is perfectly pressed. I'd say, okay, we got some suit pants here and we got a suit jacket. But the suit jacket for that suit was too, forgive me for saying this, it was too big. That's what she said, but it was too big. Because it was a suit that had the kind of lapel where what I really was going for, it wasn't going to show enough. It wasn't going to show enough. So I took the suit pants with the top, where the top was too big. Again, that's what she said. You know, the big ones hurt. And I went with this suit, which was for the single-breasted suit, which I just happened to have that was still sitting in the closet. It probably it'd been washed, and I don't even know how many months. Or not washed, but, dry cleaned. So I had the pants on and I found a pair of shoes and I put the suit on without a shirt. And it didn't look that bad. And it went down far enough where anybody who was looking was going to say, wow, this guy has abs. Bingo, this guy has abs. This was very important to me when I first started getting into working out as a scared, overweight 17-year-old kid. The first time I went on an actual diet, which wasn't really a diet, I just stopped eating crap in the fall of 1991. I just want abs. Every guy wants abs and big arms. It's actually easier to get abs. For most people, I should say. I always speak in absolutes. But I put the top on, and I was kind of impressed with how I looked. Again, I was only 33. I hadn't started having all of these. No, I was 34. I hadn't started having all the injuries and limping around, nothing. I was still in my kind of lifting prime at this point, and yeah, this will work. But wait, I need a tie. The whole point of it is the fact that he wears a jacket and a tie and no shirt. So I need a tie. I go to my closet, and I had a lot of large ties. I had clip-on ties. I said, this is fucking stupid. I couldn't find a tie. Now, my dear old dad, who it's hard to believe he had a long way to go. He had another 4 years of, as an active CPA. He had a lot of ties. But I needed like a stupid tie, something dumb, to sort of commemorate the occasion. I wasn't just going to wear a regular tie that you would wear to work. I need something else. My father had a tie, which I assume he had gotten either as a gag gift by his father or something like that. My dad's dad, Nathan Cohen, owned a bowling alley and a nightclub on Long Island. My dad had a tie that was a bowling tie. Now, I could tell you how idiotic that is, but the whole idea of the costume is idiotic. That's the point. I'm now reveling in how stupid this costume is and how people are going to simultaneously laugh and hopefully say, hey, this guy actually is in the kind of shape where he pulls this off. Yes, he looks like an idiot, but he's doing it with a certain panache. That's what the goal was. So I put on this tie, and luckily it was, if memory serves, it was a warm night. Again, warm in quotes. It wasn't really warm, but it was like low 50s, maybe even slightly warmer. And unlike today, it was not raining and there was no wind. So I didn't need to put on an extra coat when I left home. I started to leave, and then I said, no, I can't do this. This is too humiliating. But there was a little voice saying, hey, knock it off. You're going to a Halloween party. There are going to be people dressed there are going to be people dressed a lot crazier than this. This is a tame costume. It's not even a costume. It's a concept. It's a concept costume. So I took a piece of masking tape when I went back in as I was starting to question it. And I wrote the word hunk on the masking tape and I put it under the left lapel. Because then people would say, what does the word hunk mean? And then I could explain the costume, as opposed to people not having any kind of a conversation piece. Now, it was a pretty level 3 kind of stuff for me. I'm going to pat myself on the back. So I went to the party, and everyone who saw me laughed. But my sense was they were laughing because they weren't expecting to see me in costume. And also, this is not bad in terms of creativity. It wasn't difficult. He just pulled something off the rack, 3 somethings off the rack, and here's his costume. And you know what? Dressed up like a character from a 21-year-ago 80s movie, not bad. And I ended up having a really good time that night. And I didn't really make it a thing to dress up. The next time I dressed up was a Halloween party in 2011. But it wasn't really a costume. I just had one of those kind of gorilla heads. It was really stupid because I needed to have my glasses on the gorilla head to see. It was just ridiculous. But then, as a married person, I was involved in a lot of Halloween parties, and I dressed up as He-Man one year. That was very funny. Then probably my favorite costume was 10 years ago, where I dressed up as Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I let my beard grow, and I bought a sort of a Western kind of a cowboy hat, and I didn't look anything like Clint, but that was fun. It was fun doing that, and instead of having a real gun, I had like a Nerf gun. It was all in good fun. It was great stuff. And we had a lot of great Halloween parties in the like 2013 to 2017 range. It was always good to see who dressed up as what and how much effort people put into their costumes. I think it was 2016, I dressed up as Mr. Spock. That was also a good costume. That was a lot of fun. I got to go like this all night, But even as an adult, I'm grateful for the sense of camaraderie that my memories of Halloween as an adult were probably better than they actually were, because I had so much trouble fitting in, but I don't remember ever being kind of ostracized as a kid. There was always someone for me to go trick-or-treating with. And I think there was one year where my mother was actually kind of, walking the kids around. And we didn't really go very far. There are some people, or at least back then, who were out there for hours getting as much candy as possible. And hey, judgment-free zone right here. That's great. And certainly Massapequa of that era, you could do that if you wanted to. But normally it was not, I wasn't out there for much more than an hour. Maybe one time we were out there for an hour and a half. But it was just the sense of fun in the air. And from a broader sense, from Halloween forward, it's holiday season. It's Christmas season. And that's another thing that even if I didn't always get the gifts that I wanted to, because my parents, I think were very canny in the way they did that. They didn't want me to be, keeping up with the Joneses, but they didn't want to just give me what I asked for. And in a weird way, they were teaching me not only a little bit of humility, but they were giving me life lessons that it's okay to want something, but usually you got to work for it. You got to get it yourself. And that was something that I didn't get at the time. I just thought they were just being mean. No, whether or not they thought we're gonna make sure the kid understands this, I think they had the right idea. That was, some solid parenting. But Halloween to me signaled now it's holiday season. Now I got to do a full court press to get that video game system that hopefully my dear old dad will buy me. Maybe I'll get it in television this year. Will you settle for Atari 2600? Yeah, that's okay. I'll settle for that. The number of times I went to someone's house because they had a game system that I didn't. All of those are great memories. And my younger self, even though I struggled, did have a decent friend group. There were a lot of different people who I might see on a given day to play video games or play soccer or play some kind of other outdoor sport. it really wasn't a terrible early childhood, even with my social anxiety issues, even with the fact that I mean, they really weren't diagnosing the autism spectrum in 1980, but quite clearly, if you fast forward my life 30 years, if I'm born in 2003 instead of 1973, yeah, okay, we got to deal with this. But people were saying the same stuff; they just weren't using the phrases. You got to talk to him a little bit differently. You got to be a little, just have a tick more patience. He's not a bad kid, but he needs a little bit, just a touch, a little bit of coddling. I need a little bit of coddling. And when it came to Halloween, I have nothing but good memories of giggles and camaraderie and friendship, and occasionally a shit ton of candy. There really wasn't anything that I didn't eat. I know there's a whole thing with candy corn. If you like candy corn, there's something wrong with you. If you don't like it, there's also something wrong with you. Depending on who's like politics, right? If you think this, you suck. If you think that, you're okay. And then you can just flip it, or in immortal words of Richard Jeni, stick it in a blender and press frappe. But these are my thoughts on Halloween in my homeowner era. And, I don't have any candy here. I'm going to have to go out. I'm going to have to brave this horrible weather. And I'm going to have to go out and get something, certainly before noon tomorrow. They're going to be, last year there were 3 people who knocked on the door. I was prepared. I had a little bag of Hershey's Kisses and, Crackle, whatever the heck it was. But I'm looking forward to Halloween because you're going to see crazy costumes on social media, and it's always fun. Now the holiday it's purely enjoyable because of that, where it almost seems to exist to entertain adults. And I'm not doing any crazy shit this year. I'm not getting dressed up. I could wear the shirt and say, yeah, I'm an Abercrombie and Fitch model, but we're not even going to do that. So in advance, a happy Halloween to one and all. Cliche though it may be, please be safe if you're gonna go crazy or get crazy. And I hope that you all have an amazing holiday tomorrow. And I don't take issue with it. I'm not calling this a Hallmark holiday or anything. People love Halloween, and I have mostly good memories of the holiday. And I hope that all of you who do choose to have outsized fun tomorrow do it safely and make new memories, new core memories, Halloween 2025. This has been episode 635 of the Confessions of the... Can you imagine? I blow the ending of my own. That's pretty bad. You know the name of my podcast. But I want to thank you all for spending some of your miserable Thursday evening, October 30th, 2025, here with me in New York. But if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.